what are you most worried about, broadly? When we talk about protecting our democracy, and I'll just share, I immediately think of my, two little guys, right, 5 and 3, and I just think, what is it going to look like in terms of, what we have here, and how is their voice going to be heard, so on and so forth. But what I guess worries you, what scares you, and then hopefully, what gives you optimism? Why do you think we are going to be successful and in a career?
Welcome to Pod Talks. Pod Talks is a project of protecting our democracy, where we bring together the best minds in New Jersey and beyond to talk about some of the issues facing us right now, our challenges facing our democracy, our institutions, and certainly our personal freedoms. I'm Sean Stiller, Chair of Protecting Our Democracy. With me today, we've got 3 great labor leaders who are powerhouses and just here to talk a little bit about labor and its role in protecting our democracy as well.
We've got Petal Robertson. Petal.
Hi, everyone.
We got Fran Ehret. Fran.
Hi.
And Becky Givan.
Hi.
And I'm really excited to have them with me today. Fran is the New Jersey State Director of the Communications Workers of America. Prior to her appointment in this role in 2021, Fran served as the National Staff Representative at CWA and as the President of the Turnpike Workers, IFPTE Local 194. She's a member of the New Jersey State Democratic Committee and a leader in the LGBTQ community, and the proud daughter of a union leader and community activist. And thank you again, Fran, for being here. Becky Givan is the current General Vice President of Rutgers AAUP-AFT, a union of full-time tenured, non-tenured track faculty, graduate workers, postdocs, and counselors. She's an Associate Professor of Labor Studies and Employment Relations at Rutgers, State University of New Jersey. Whoop, whoop, Petal. She's the co-editor of Strike for the Common Good, Fighting for the Future of Public Education, University of Michigan Press 2020, and many other publications. Thank you for being here as well.
Thank you.
And we have Petal Robertson. Petal is a high school English teacher. She was elected as a Secretary-Treasurer of the New Jersey Education Association in 2021. Prior to her being elected in the statewide role, Petal was the president of the Montclair Education Association from 2017 through 2021. Petal's parents immigrated to the United States from Guyana, and the experience of growing up as the youngest child of first-generation Americans has shaped her commitment to education and union work. Petal, thank you as well. Well, listen, here we are, and probably want to also say a big thank you to Trend Coffee and Tea House. Great spot here in Montclair. We're excited to be here, and I'm enjoying my second cup of hot chocolate. So when I'm super jittery today, everybody will know why. What did you guys go with, by the way? Tea, coffee? What did everyone go with?
Coffee.
Coffee, and it was very good.
Water. I didn't think you were going to ask.
Oh, well, there you go. Serves you right. Now you know. Well, thank you again to the staff and owners here for allowing us to use the space. We appreciate that. And maybe we just wanted to start off today just by asking each of you, for our listeners, who do you represent? I know we've got, quick back of the envelope, a lot of members here. I mean, a third of a million members that collectively everyone represents here. But oftentimes people talk about well, who are these people that we represent? The working folks that each of you represents. Becky, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, we might go smallest to largest. So I'm the General Vice President, past president of the full-time academic union at Rutgers, and we represent about 5,000 full-time faculty, both tenure track and non-tenure track, graduate workers, postdoctoral researchers, and some counselors. And we work arm in arm with our adjunct faculty union and our biomedical faculty union. So with all of that larger set of academic workers, that's about 9,000 folks. And then also proudly work with the Coalition of Rutgers Unions, which is 20,000 workers, all of whom, of course, have their own democratic structures and leaders. But we're very proud to work together as Rutgers workers.
Excellent. I definitely want to come back to that democratic structure in a second. But Fran, you can tell us a little bit about it.
So, yeah, I'm the New Jersey Area Director for CWA, and we represent about 70,000 workers throughout the state, local government workers. We have all of the state colleges. We have employees there. At the state, we have every single department, Division of Children and Families, Motor Vehicles, Department of Transportation. We represent lower level workers and supervisors. We also represent private sector workers. CWA represents Verizon and AT&T workers throughout the country, and those that are left here in New Jersey. It's shrunk quite a bit here in New Jersey. But primarily, that's who we represent. So.
Thank you. Petal?
So I'm the Secretary-Treasurer for the New Jersey Education Association, and we represent all different levels of public school employees. So everyone from your bus driver, your secretary, all the way to some of our higher education professors. We have approximately 200,000 in membership. I like to also say that we represent the community because we do a wealth of community work as well.
Well, Becky, you said something, and I want to ask all of you this. Oftentimes people trying to levy criticism at unions say, well, you're not connected to your members, or the union says this, but we're cool with the members. And I always kind of smile when I see them try to make that disconnect. But you talked about the democratic process, right? So explain to our listeners how you as leaders stay connected and are part of the association, how decisions are made to make sure it is the decisions of the association that are moving forward. How does that work in the structures that you guys represent?
I mean, we all have, various legal structures and bylaws that we follow and all of that, but to me it's really how we live and how that works every day. And we have, our union has an elected governing body, which it will not surprise you with the Union of Academic Workers, a lot of strong opinions in any union meeting, and that's our decision making body. And we've had robust contested elections in recent years. Not every position is contested, but we feel good that people want to run. People have opinions, and we don't always vote in a way that would be predictable. When I was president, my preference didn't always win out, and that's a good thing. It doesn't feel great, but it's also a really healthy thing that people are in there. There's really rigorous debate, and people are discussing what they actually want and what makes sense, and they're not afraid to cast a vote the way they feel. We have elections. Every member is able to run and cast a vote, and then we hope that our representative bodies that emerge from those elections will really represent the members. So I think those are some of the key things. I'll say one other thing, which is that between elections, we just try to be as transparent and inclusive as possible. And I think we're always learning about ways to do better. But, what does it mean when you're bargaining to be inclusive, to share information, to make sure that along the way there is an opportunity to have a back and forth? And we're always trying to think about how to be transparent, how to be inclusive, and how to improve in those dimensions.
Thank you. Fran?
I have to echo a lot of what Becky just said, because as a union, we do have our own structures and bylaws and constitution. Also, when it comes to not just our internal elections, but when we're talking about elected leaders that we want to support and consider for support throughout the state and on a national level, we have committees that get together and they do surveys of elected leaders. They also do interviews in person, and really it's a rigorous process to make sure that the people that we're looking to endorse care about the same things that we do, have the same values that we do.
Petal?
One of the things I think NJEA does really well is make sure that the power stays in the hands of the people. And to that point, we have the same thing, those structures in place that everybody from local, county, to state, all governance leaders have to be elected. We have our delegate assembly where each item is voted on. What I think we have a lot of that works very well for us are a lot of checks and balances along the way, in which members have an opportunity to voice their opinions, where they stand on different issues, and it's not something that it's just the three officers get to make all the decisions and whatever they say goes, but we're really out there having votes and listening to the members, and that's the foundational piece. I think the other thing that we do very well is communicating with our members. We're constantly holding professional development sessions so members understand how valued their voice is and how to bring their voice into other spaces. We have Zooms every year, all the time, just to check in with our members to see where they stand before we even discuss our budget. We meet across the state with our members to find out what are the things they value. So we create value-based budgets for them. And we have, like you said, in terms of the electoral process, we have committees that come together to discuss what is the best, who are the best choices for our association. So there's so many pathways into the association that help us keep in touch with our members.
Excellent. I'm glad I was going to ask if you, because Fran noted the making sure everyone's involved, even in the political space of deciding who to support, and it's the same thing as well with those meetings. Petal, maybe I'd start with you. coming out of a pandemic here, right? Something that none of us could have, no one, right, knew was coming, and certainly had to figure out how to go through. What are the biggest challenges now that you see facing the NJEA, facing members, facing public education as we, I'll hopefully say kind of coming through the pandemic? We know it's, coronavirus just going to be with us here, but as we come through it at this phase, at least, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing the NJEA members in education?
So I would be remiss if I didn't mention the teacher shortage. We're obviously coming out of that pandemic, we're seeing a shortage of teachers, and there's a variety of reasons that occurs. But I think
is it just teachers too, Petal? Would you say?
No, it is our educational support professionals. We're losing bus drivers, secretaries, our paraprofessionals, and it is a major threat to our public school institutions as a whole. And we're seeing a rise in that coming out of the pandemic for a variety of reasons and things that NJEA is advocating to put a stop to in terms of unnecessary barriers for new students, for younger people to come into the profession, but also just respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming, when coming out of the pandemic, we saw this sort of flip politically from this attack on public education, public sector unions, and our public educators. And so I think that became one of our bigger challenges, to bring respect back to the teaching profession, to our education support professionals, and to our teachers.
Thank you. Fran, what are you guys seeing as some of the biggest challenges? Obviously, you've got people everywhere, and state employees especially, and people relied so much on state services and government really to get through the pandemic. But what are you seeand as we kind of come through it now?
Well, I'm going to echo what Petal was just talking about in terms of retention and recruitment. We're really struggling with a lot of vacancies throughout the state of New Jersey. I think the attacks on public employees and the things that you're saying, have been they've been a big problem, but they got even more so during the pandemic. And I think that there has been, when you look at how much everything costs, healthcare wise and pension wise, I think that's also been a barrier for people to want to come into public service. They don't see it in the same way as a career that, that looks like something that they really will feel good about doing when you're constantly hearing people attack. And I think that's one of the big problems. But also, there's challenges around also with telework and, work from home. Those are some of the challenges in keeping people informed and making sure that we're having Zoom meetings and things like that, where, we've had new technology like Teams and Zoom and all that's been very helpful to us to be able to keep connected. But those are probably the two main challenges.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think even in conversations I hear in almost any space, there's what is the impact of work from home now for any sector, right? What that looks like, and also especially for public workers and those in public service, reduction of pensions and health benefits and all the things that we've seen over the years and the attacks that people have faced. It's just professions that people are less likely to stay in then because of some of those things. But Becky, I guess I'll go to you. And in your case, some exciting space, some good news in that you guys recently went out on strike, right, and made demands of trying to have livable wages and make sure you've got conditions that are conducive to being successful. Can you tell us a little bit about why you went out, what that was all about, what that was like, and some of the successes that you were able to achieve in that process?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting asking that as right after thinking about the pandemic, because I think for us, the crisis that we all were thrust into in the pandemic really brought everything into really sharp relief in terms of what the university administration hoped to do and what we needed to push back against and what we would not defeat without being willing to strike. And I always say, you don't have to go on strike, you don't prefer to go on strike, but you will win if you are ready and willing to go on strike. And that means thousands of members have to be ready. And so for us, the experience of the pandemic, where the Rutgers administration imposed layoffs of staff, of adjunct faculty, of our most vulnerable, threatened to withhold raises, really took the most severe approach, even when they ended up with a big infusion of federal dollars, our members really, those who hadn't been paying attention, really thought now is time. And what we did when we negotiated around the pandemic crisis, we prioritized protecting the most vulnerable among us, and that became almost a mantra. Maybe some people would say it was cliched, but when we built for our contract campaign and we had aligned all our contracts, they were all expiring at the same time. We had learned in the past what we needed to do better on in terms of working together. Our members were ready to fight for, especially adjunct faculty and graduate workers. Adjunct faculty were living with poverty pay and no job security and no health care, which we still have more work to do on. And our graduate workers were making far below a living wage. And we had, we built and we talked to our members. And one of the things that was most gratifying was people who are familiar with Rutgers know that, there are some faculty who are doing just fine. There are some very, very elite programs where people are getting paid, nationally competitive salaries. And to have some of those folks, while we were out on strike, email me personally and say, I got so much from being on the picket line. I am here for graduate workers and adjunct faculty. And these are people whose salaries would probably make any of our eyes pop out, but they were really, really comfortable with what we were fighting for, and they were willing to strike for it. And I think that really built because of the experience of the pandemic and the university's approach to the pandemic.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And congrats to us all.
Thank
you for the work you and everybody did there, but we all benefit from that. I think all of New Jersey does. And certainly as an alum, I thank you as well for everything there. As I listen to that, I just have to ask, maybe in kind of switching a little bit, like, how it is that everybody got into this work, right? Fighting for faculty, staff, and for everyone else, and fighting for, K-12 and higher ed, fighting for, workers in New Jersey. Like, what was the journey? What was the path that each of you went on to kind of get into the position to say, I think I'm going to be, become a union leader here and, do this work? Fran, maybe with you, like, what was it on your journey? How did you get to this position?
Well, I grew up in a union household. Both my parents were union members, and my father was a labor organizer. And growing up, most of our vacations were centered around picket lines and going to protests and things like that. We were, just all over the place. My father was also a great negotiator, and he worked for the union that represented the workers at the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. And I got a job working on the Turnpike and, just rose up through the ranks as a shop steward, chapter officer. I was the treasurer for the local before I ran for president of the local. And I had great mentorship throughout, all of that. And, on top of that, my father was really, raised us to care about social and economic justice for other people besides union members. The fact that you have to, take care of the people in the community was extremely important to my family. And, the concept of, high tides rise all boats was something that was, just really ingrained in us. And I try to carry that on just, the way I was taught. So
yeah, well, I look forward to hearing about some of those vacations of the time, which
yeah.
picket lines you were on. But
yeah.
Petal, I heard something similar there with what you said in terms of helping the community. So maybe going to you, like, how is it that you decided to go into this role or get into this space?
It's funny because I don't think any teacher, I don't think you leave school and say, oh, I can't wait to be on the picket line. Like, that's never, you come in, you're like, I'm an English teacher, I'm going to teach in my little corner of the room. But I did not grow up in a union family, but I did grow up from a very big family. As you stated, my family's from Guyana. My mom was one of 8, my dad one of 14, and we have a zillion cousins, and we were together all the time. And I began to realize the power of all of us being together. Like, no one messes with you when you're with like 30 cousins. And so that part always stuck with me. And when I was working in Montclair, we faced a privatization fight. We had a superintendent come in that was intent on privatizing the district. And I have to be honest, my first thought was, I'm just going to quit. Like, I'm just going to quit. I'm going to go somewhere else. And I decided one day, before I quit, I'm going to go to this board meeting and tell everyone how I feel. And I went to the board meeting, and I kind of let it loose. And the president at the time said, I think you just made your vice president's speech. And on that privatization fight, it was like no turning back for me then. You recognize the power of community and the power of people, and we were up against so much corporate money in that fight, and all we had was ourselves. And I think I recognized in that moment the only thing that beats corporate power is people power, and that's what sort of got me entrenched into the union work. And from there, I became the president, and we had some of our own battles, which are very tough. Like you said, no one intends to be on a picket line. No one intends to do those things, but it also became some of the most bonding moments I've ever had in my career. And so from there, I pursued that to the NJEA, and I have not regretted a single decision since.
Oh, excellent. Well, Becky, that goes to you, and that, as Petal just said, and you noted it, those types of things, getting on the picket line together brings people together, right?
Yeah.
That is a bonding experience. But on your journey, how did you get to that place where you became the one having those conversations and leading a group that's going out and getting these victories?
Yeah, it's hard to say. My academic area, what I teach is labor studies. So I've been thinking about this in different directions for forever at this point. But I grew up in a union household, but also as a kid I lived actually in the north of England. So my you think most people in the U.S. Don't have the experience of going on strike or even seeing a picket line in their day-to-day life. Well, I grew up with I have memories of the miners' strike. I have one of my really clear childhood memories is my mom putting money in a collection bucket on a picket line. And I was young enough I didn't understand, and she explained it to me, and it kind of stuck with me. So I have memories like that where it was just kind of around me. I mean, I didn't know anyone who didn't support unions and workers, which is not necessarily an experience you would have like in the contemporary U.S. to not have any diversity of opinion there. And then I think I had workplace experiences that dovetailed with my sort of political consciousness, where I really knew when I was a graduate worker at Northwestern, we organized collectively, not ultimately going in. It ended up being more of an issue campaign around unequal pay that we won, and it didn't go into organizing. Although decades later, those workers now have won their union, and that feels really good to know that sometimes this is a long, long game. But I think in terms of and so my sort of situation has always been that I want to do whatever it is that will be most helpful and worthwhile to strengthen the union. And I never wanted to be a union leader. I was willing to be a union leader if the folks around me, the folks I trusted, the folks voting, thought that would be best for all of us. But it was never something that I thought, I want to do this. I need to do this. It's important to me personally. It was more about I want to do whatever it is that I have to give to contribute to this collective endeavor. And so that's kind of been my approach throughout in my time in leadership, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting to just listen to the common themes through how each of you got here. And as your comment, I just have to think back. My dad from New Zealand, and he'd always talk about the unions and the power of unions and everything there, and it was just so foreign to him. He'd be going like, I don't understand, why isn't this a given, but it's just different in other places for sure, Well, listen, we just, we're here, we're talking, protecting our democracy, right? And I think it's fitting. The President of the United States just gave a speech on protecting our democracy and what's at stake right now. And we see everything that's happening out there. I dare say unions play a huge role in protecting our democracy, and have and will continue to, and maybe even more so at this specific time. From each of you, what work do you do through the union? What work does the organization, your union, do that you think directly connects to helping to protect the democracy, helping to safeguard a lot of the things that maybe we take for granted oftentimes? Fran, maybe I'll start with you. What would you say?
Well, we have a lot of conversations with our members about what is happening right now throughout the country. It's really important for people to understand, the connection to fascism, and it's, we represent all different kinds of members, right? I mean, not everybody is on the same page politically, and so we think that that's very important. And we have to do more to try to make sure that our process is for voting is open for everybody throughout this country. And so, we try to help those efforts to make sure that where they're closing voting, places and things like that, that we're, mobilizing people to go fight for those kinds of things because they can't do it alone. They have to see that this is happening, throughout the country, and that people care about what's happening here. And I think that, unions play a very important role because we're the most organized force in this country that is not corporate power, as Petal was saying earlier. And although we've shrunk over the years, we, I think, have a higher responsibility to step up and do these kinds of things.
Yeah, huge piece. I often say to individuals who, push back against unions, I'll note that unions have been shrinking, but so has the gap between the wealthiest among us and everyone else. And it's the unions that are helping to prevent that or keep that closer. But, Petal, going to you in just terms of protecting our democracy, there's oftentimes, I know you hear directly, right? Stay in your lane, right? Talk about education. Go teach, math and language arts. Why do you care about this other stuff? And certainly education has been on the front lines if you want to talk about some of the culture war pieces and book banning and some of those other pieces that directly affect a democracy to be successful. But what work do you see in terms of directly impacting protecting our democracy as far as the NJEA and the work goes?
So the English teacher in me was going to figure out how to talk about book bans at some point anyway, because I think we might be underestimating just how drastic book bans actually are, because it's not just a matter of saying, oh, well, we're no longer going to teach this Amanda Gorman work. It's telling students who look like Amanda Gorman, who share Amanda Gorman's history, that you're no longer relevant, you're no longer important, and it's no longer valued. And it's that messaging that we keep communicating to people, to our LGBTQIA plus students, to our Black and Brown students, and even to our Black and Brown educators, and to our LGBTQIA plus educators, we're saying this institution that was formerly a safe place for you, where you knew that your history was valuable, is no longer true. That's what a book ban says. And it's often done by people who have no concept of what is even in the book. We're banning things like Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume, but no one can tell you why. I think when we think about democracy, book bans are at the forefront of it because they're about silencing, and silencing is the opposite of democracy. The voice of the people has to be heard. So one of the things that we are doing is advocating against book banning, absolutely, but also educating our members so that they know. We have a Center for Honesty, where when this rhetoric is being pushed out, all of this false rhetoric about public institutions and curricula are being pushed out, our members are getting trained in how to properly respond, how to go to board meetings and make sure that people understand the need to teach truth. So we're making sure that we do that at our member level. We have legislative action groups, so to make sure that we're paying attention, we know what bills are coming out, we know what our not just presidential races look like, but what does your local race look like? And making sure that our members in our community understand how much those local races affect them in particular. And we are strengthening our communities through our Pride programs and our Family and Students First programs, so that our communities recognize that you have a voice in how your public schools run, but how all of your public institutions run. And to your point, Fran, also making sure that people understand their voting rights, people have access to voting, and people understand just how important elections are. Elections matter, elections change our lives, and that is a message that we have been pushing constantly.
And important, I think both what you and Fran said, no matter what side of the aisle or wherever your political persuasion is, important for everyone, right? If you want a thriving democracy, everyone's got to be involved and engaged and know all of the things that you're both talking about here. And I'd probably say, Petal, on some level too, making sure that at the most basic of levels, students can get through misinformation, disinformation, know how to, do proper research, understand things. Those are all becoming more and more important as we see AI and other spaces where information is not as trusted. How do we get through that? That is that next generation going to have to deal with all of that maybe we, to some lesser extent, have had to.
Absolutely. And just one note, I would say, Sean, too, what we're seeing is Fran's work, my work, but you're seeing it's working. Where we saw in our Board of Education races, we saw in our town council races, in our mayoral races, we're seeing that it's working. Those who believe in truth, those who believe in valuing diversity, those who believe in the value of public sector unions, those are the people that are winning. So what we're doing is working.
Becky, maybe to ask you, and same kind of question, but maybe through the lens we've all seen. College campuses are kind of on the front line of what's being said, and freedom of speech, and the conversations around that, and what's allowed, and what is inappropriate, and what's too far. How does that all connect in terms of what you see in the spaces you're in to protecting our democracy, making sure we uphold some of the basic principles, but also maintaining safe spaces for people as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that public education is the foundation of our democracy, and that's K-12 and it's higher education. And, the attempt to both defund public education and control ideologically public education is an attempt to undermine our ability as a society to have educated voters, to have people participating, to have people who are critical thinkers. All of that is an attack on democracy when you attack public education in that way. I think what we're seeing now, the attacks on what's going on college campuses, and interestingly, both public and private college campuses, is it's a continuation of what we've seen for years, right? So it's these weaponization of ideas like diversity, equity, and inclusion, or critical race theory, which of course most people weaponizing that don't know what it is, to try to undermine the good work that's going on in public education that allows people to think critically, whether that means to read the full breadth of the amazing literature that's out there, or whether it means to understand the history of our country, to understand the history as it might apply to people who looked like you in the past, who so often have been left out of our curriculum. And I think these attacks really demonstrate the bad faith of those who want to bring down public education as a path to bringing down democracy. We see this sort of these guises of things like free speech when it suits you, or calling out anti-Semitism when it suits you, that are really about weaponizing hot button issues in order to further a really long-standing agenda, which is quite an extremist agenda. It's also a very, very well-funded agenda. It's of a piece with the privatization that Petal talked about earlier. It's all the same people, the same ideologues, and it's an attempt to bring down democracy by bringing down public education.
Something there that I guess I'd ask all of you too is, at the core of that effort is always division, right? To be very divisive, right? Pick an issue and make sure you try to use that as a wedge and talk about it more. Each of you represents on many levels a diverse group of members. They have different views as well. What's it like, or how do you bring, I guess, differing ideas and concepts and minds together to say, this is our vision, these are the spaces we should be in, when not everyone may, have the same views on an issue? Petal?
Start with me. That is a tough one, but what I've found is that there's always a common ground for people somewhere. There's always something that we all can agree upon, that we value in public education. It might be that we value the institution of public education, and sort of starting from there and having those discussions and having creating space for knowledgeable, respectful sharing of opinion and of voice, recognizing that we each took different paths in life, and that shapes how we see the world. But I think one of the things that we have done a very good job of doing at NJEA is creating space for all of those different voices. So you're not only learning sort of that one algorithm that social media tends to give you that tells you whatever you're thinking is automatically the right thing, but putting you in rooms and spaces with people who have differing opinions and creating a structure in which you get to listen and hear those opinions. It doesn't always change everyone's mind, I'll be honest, but it does give us space to see the person across from us that doesn't agree with us as human and not the enemy. And I think what some powers that be have done well in terms of being divisive is made us believe that anyone that disagrees with you is the enemy. And there's no common destroyed almost. And what we've done is we've managed to bring those pieces together, provide historical facts, provide information, but also provide space for emotion and voice so that we can begin to see each other as humans trying to get through what is an incredibly difficult time in our country and in our culture.
Well, as you just said it there, I mean, probably we'd all agree that's at the core of any healthy democracy, right? We've got to be able to look at each other and say we're not always going to agree on every issue. But when we do disagree, we're going to talk about it. We're going to see where we can come together, where we can't, how we can figure things out, and know that at the end of the day, we're still going to sip our hot chocolate or have our or water, and get along, right? So I mean that's the core of it. Fran, what do you see in terms of a diverse membership and how you keep everyone together and still move forward with a vision that's broader that maybe not everyone agrees with?
Yeah, it is a very difficult challenge, and it's still something I would say that we're coping with within our organization. We've started to also do some of these trainings on different topics so that it would give us a place to start from, having some dialogue around different issues. But it's important for us to understand that we're not always going to be able to change everybody's minds, and that's sometimes difficult for us to sort of reconcile ourselves with. But I think we've been doing a pretty good job of trying to have civil conversations within our organization, and doing some diversity training and things like that sort of are giving folks an opportunity to talk about these issues in sort of a safer space. And we're trying to create more of those opportunities, and I think we're going to be doing a lot more work around this in the coming year, especially.
Mm-hmm. And as you've engaged in those kind of conversations and those pieces, has everyone been pretty receptive to having those conversations and engaging in that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix sometimes because there are some members, I think, that don't really see the connection to labor. Why are we talking about some of the things that have to do with like immigration or LGBT rights? And that for us is the place where we have to really make those connections, for economic and social justice and equality for all. We represent all these different members that this affects. And I think oftentimes, people don't see that. And we have to show them that is where, the connection is. And, at the end of the day, we have, we still have a challenge here. It's not going to be, I think we got over the next, couple months in the next year before this next election, we have an awful lot of work still to do.
No question. And maybe, Becky, maybe it's a little bit, as I think I listen to Fran, maybe a little bit more like Petal's situation where from an educational space, there's always even if you're not sure where you're at in this, we teach students each and every day who are in all of these spaces. And there's always that this is why we're doing some of this work. But for you specifically, what do you see as kind of that navigation that you're doing to make sure everybody kind of comes together around these issues, some issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think as both Petal and Fran said, it's never going to be perfect in that you have a conversation and everybody 100% agrees on every issue and every candidate to support and everything else. But I think what you really need to do is create spaces for those respectful conversations. And for us, picket line was one of those spaces. I'm not suggesting that you have to go on strike in order to do it.
Well, Fran goes on vacation to do that.
Yeah,
so that's
but we really, we obviously all represent workers that are diverse in terms of identity, but we also represent workers that are diverse in terms of the work that they do. And having those conversations where they're on the picket line, in a Zoom meeting, in a social situation that is a union you've created, where people can really understand. When I think about, the relationship between a secure, decades tenured faculty member and their adjunct colleague, even in the same department, they may have never had a conversation. They may not know each other's names. They may not know what each other does. And so having the ability to understand, you're worried about what I'm worried about. You're worried about how you're going to pay for your kids' college. You're worried about, whether public education is under attack. But having a space to have those conversations, I think, helps dramatically, and I think it's on us as union leadership to create those spaces, but then to trust workers to talk to each other. They can do it. They don't need us guiding it. Having comfortable contexts, those conversations are extremely powerful. I think, for example, hearing from a K-12 student that they've never had a teacher that looked like them, if they're an African American male student, right? And thinking, well, isn't that on all of us, right? That's not on this student or the parent of this student. That's on all of us, right? And so I think once we understand and we tap into sort of empathy and solidarity, it really does move people. They're not going to be moved by, receiving a very nice union publication in the mail, although we work hard on our union publications. They're going to be moved by a sort of common experience that comes out of a conversation with somebody, and we can do it within our unions, and I think powerfully across our unions as well. You don't need to only talk to people within your own union.
So let me take that piece and go maybe a little more broadly. And as we kind of conclude our conversation here, just want to talk to each of you about what are you most worried about, broadly. When we talk about protecting our democracy, and I'll just share, I immediately think of my, two little guys, right, 5 and 3, and I just think, what is it going to look like in terms of the, what we have here, and how is their voice going to be heard, so on and so forth. But what I guess worries you, what scares you, and then hopefully, what gives you optimism? Why do you think we are going to be successful and move from there?
Yeah, I mean the one word answer to what I'm worried about is fascism, right? I think that's what's driving a lot of our anxiety. But I think the attacks on democracy and public education, which are real and which are here. I think that keeps I think many of my members certainly up at night. But I think what gives me hope is, and this again comes a lot out of the experience of being on strike, is what people are willing to do, right? With good organizing, with inclusive organizing, with hard work, and it is work. It's not something you can just turn on or flip a switch. People are really willing to fight, and I think having the experience of what people are willing to do, what people are willing to sacrifice and risk in order to fight is it's really moving to me. And so having seen that in our members, that there's a lot of reason for hope as well.
Fran?
Yeah, what frightens me is also fascism and the fact that there's so much disinformation out there. How it's really hard for us to sort of combat every little thing that's being said. I think we have some good opportunities in the coming year because we're going to create some forums and things like that. But we have really a lot to do to fight back against this. And I think the other thing that scares me is not everybody believes it, right? Like not everybody really sees it in the same way that we do, that this is actually something that could happen, that our past can repeat itself. But the things that give me optimism are seeing people rise up and fight back, the organizing that's going on around the country, the folks that are going on strike, like you did at Rutgers, and, we had the big strike, with the auto workers, and, we've had a bunch of strikes at CWA with Verizon workers and things like that, and organizing that's happening at, places like Starbucks and Amazon and, things like that. Seeing young people who really seem to get what's going on in this country and that they want something better and are willing to organize and fight back.
Petal?
So I'll say with no hyperbole, the end of democracy. I think the coming elections weigh very heavily on my soul when I think about it, and making sure that people, to Fran's point, understand how serious this is, and recognizing that the end of labor unions is drastic for marginalized people. Labor unions were created to be a level of an equalizer for all marginalized voices, and that includes those socioeconomically marginalized. And to end that, to have that come to an end, which would be what happens with the end of a democracy, is terrifying. I think the results are terrifying. I'm not sure that everyone has really grasped the reality of what that looks like. But what gives me hope are things like this, when I get to sit with other labor leaders and hear just how much we're on the same page with each other, and our members themselves, the pushback that they're giving to all of these forces that are here to destroy labor unions. But democracy, classrooms. I have to tell you, when you walk into those classrooms and they're so diverse and so intelligent and so passionate, the potential in every one of those classrooms is the one thing that says, okay, you can go to sleep now. Because, even when the adults don't have it figured out, I'm telling you, these kids, they do. They do. And if they are our future, I feel so much more confident about the hands that we're in. So that's what gives me optimism.
Well, that's a great way to kind of, I think, conclude our conversation, because that's why we do what we do at the core here, right? To try and leave the world a little bit better place for those who come after us and whatever it is, and getting inspiration from those kids or those classrooms or those settings that we're in really makes a difference. So I just want to thank each of you for being here today, and thanks for the conversation. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks also to Trent again, Coffee and Tea House, and it's been great to be in here. We appreciate it, and we really enjoyed the space and the conversation. Thank you guys as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.